Welcome to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and I am thrilled to share with you information about resiliency, well-being, performance, education, business, parenting, and everything in between. I'm committed to joining you each week to talk about these big ideas and bring them into action, habits, tools, strategies, tactics that allow us to finally uncover what it takes to truly be well. And I'm just so excited that you're here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and it's been a minute for me. I was able to take some time away from the worky work, and I was able to actually record a few episodes to get us set up. And this is me jumping back in after a few weeks of being offline. And I can share with you transitioning back into the worky work after some break away from work. It can be a wee bit challenging. I even noticed that I was feeling a wee bit of procrastinating behavior to record again because I noticed I was out of flow. I was out of my stride of just get into work, do my thing, sign off at the end of the day. And it takes a wee bit of time to transition back into being productive, having that intensity of focusing and showing up and doing that good work. So I thought today it might be useful. And as always, I want to be useful for you to share a tool that I use that has helped me learn to identify some of these procrastination behaviors or perhaps even some protest behavior. So today is all about the 4 archetypes of self-awareness. Now, from my understanding, the archetypes of self-awareness was first introduced by Dr. Tash Urich in 2019. She did an amazing TED Talk, and it's used in lots of different places and spaces, but it's not very often attributed to her research. And to me, as somebody who is also contributing interesting research, I think, into the world, I think it's so important to talk about where it is coming from. So a huge shout out to Dr. Tasha Urich. Again, 2019 is when it's referenced. She put this piece of work out into the world. But again, I do just want to hold space. I see this replicated in so many places without giving her acknowledgement. And I think it is crucial that when we're contributing and we are being content creators, that we acknowledge and recognize where the information is coming from. Now, I might be feeling a wee bit sensitive to this because while I was away, it was brought to my attention that somebody was using a lot of my material without referencing. So I think I'm just a little bit hypersensitive to that right now. So my gentle invitation, again, whenever you're referencing somebody else's work, please take a moment to notice and acknowledge and recognize who brought it forward, even if it was, this is something I heard Dr. Robyne say, and I wanted to be able to share it with you. Had that person done that, who literally essentially has commandeered an entire one of my keynotes, had they done that, it would have been great. My material's on purpose, open educational resource. I want people to share things. However, I think there's a way and an etiquette of sharing things. So, okay, I've clearly already digressed. So let's get back to these archetypes of self-awareness. Now, I love a good model. I love a good framework, and this is a goodie. So if you imagine a 4-square model, so if you imagine a box and there's 4 squares, and the continuums within those squares are high levels of internal self-awareness and high levels of external self-awareness. And then if you imagine them on that grid, it's like varying degrees of higher levels or lower levels of knowing self and knowing other. So what we see here when we look at this resource, and again, this resource is helping people understand how they process, how they basically create their own internal map of their self-awareness. So in the high self-awareness for internal. Okay, so these folks know about themselves really well, but they're quite disconnected from outside or external. We call those the introspectors. So these are people that are very clear on who they are, but they're very limited in terms of seeking information from other people. So they have quite a few blind spots. They're not open to feedback, and this can very much harm relationships and limit their success in many different life areas. So they're very confident about themselves. They know what they like, they know what they don't like, but they aren't open to external input. So again, they are very well aware of their internal pieces, but they aren't open to outside world. Now, on the lower end of that continuum, so that's the top left, on the bottom left, we have folks who are low in internal and low in external, and we call these seekers. They have no idea really who they are. They don't know what they stand for. They don't really even really understand how people perceive them. And as a result, they often feel frustrated with relationships. They feel frustrated with their performance because they're quite, I guess you could say it this way, rudderless, right? They're out there in the world, but they really don't have any direction. They don't really know where they're going, and they're not very open to receiving feedback from other people, and they themselves don't really know where they're going. Now, I think it's helpful just to pause and recognize that seekers in a particular age and stage of our development, this is actually pretty useful. So, especially in adolescence, we don't want folks to be too rigid in adolescence when they're growing and they're evolving and they're imagining kind of what's possible, to be kind of stuck in this place where either that they're, again, we call this kind of moratorium of lost. So we don't want them to be stuck, but we want them to at least be open to the fact that it isn't like so rigid. I'll give you an example. I remember working with a young student teacher candidate, and she said, I wanted to be an educator since I was 3 years old. I used to set up my dolls, set up my teddy bears, and all I've ever wanted to do is teach. And I was like, great. So here she is in her Bachelor of Education pursuing this lifelong dream. And she has her first placement. And I remember her coming to my office in absolute tears. And she said, I don't like kids. I don't like teaching kids. I don't like being around kids. I can't believe that this is what I thought I wanted my whole life, but I don't want this anymore. And this student was like devastated. She felt so lost because she thought that's what she wanted. This wasn't what she wanted. And she just didn't even know what her next right move was. So we call that seekers. Low sense of who they are, low sense of their kind of information from outside sources. Okay, so now if we flip to the other side, so now we're in the quadrant of the upper right corner, we call this aware. This is when the person has a pretty good sense of who they are. They also are open to feedback from external sources. They're open to even just a wee bit of adapting based on feedback that they receive. Now, they don't accept all feedback as valid per se. They use their critical thinking and really take information only from credible and trustworthy sources. However, they are open to be persuaded. They're open to that feedback. They realize that their best chance of being this evolved, healthy, well-resourced person is having a good sense of who they are, but they're open to hearing information from other people. So we call those people who are aware. This is optimally where we're trying to get to. Now, in the bottom corner on that right side, we have what's called pleasers. So they're high on the continuum of other, but they're low on their awareness of self. Those are called the pleasers. They are the folks, again, perhaps it's that disease to please. It's just this idea that they're not pleasing necessarily because they're kind. They're being pleasers because it's their nervous system's way of trying to stay safe. It's minimizing rejection. It's minimizing the potential of somebody giving them information that's, that could hurt their sense of self. So they just put so much emphasis on other people, just trying to keep everybody happy. We also see, if we think about the stress model, we also see a lot of folks in this space that would be fawning, that placating. And often when we talk about fawning, it's this idea that we're just trying to find like a way to keep the peace, in the sense of we just want people to be safe. We want them to be happy. The need for, let's say, for example, if you go away with a group of friends and you need everyone to be having fun, You need everyone to be okay. You want everybody to be having fun. That's often when we start to see that fawning behavior. That is an example of fawning. Okay, so if we think about these four self awareness archetypes, we know that we have the introspectors, high sense of self, low other, seekers, low on both, aware, high on both, and our pleasers, low on self and high on other. Now, what does this have to do with me procrastinating, getting back into my workflow? Well, something that I have learned about myself is because I think of my ADHD, that it's easier for me to just keep going. I mean that. So if I'm busy with a lot of work, it's easier for me just to keep going versus stopping and then trying to find the motivation, the energy, the focus, the drive to start back up again. It's so much easier for me just to stay busy than to be busy, stop, relaxed, have some recovery time, and then get back into it. I don't transition very well. And I shared that actually on an earlier episode. So when I noticed that there was a wee bit of protest behavior, maybe just a little bit of procrastination, instead of getting myself in a tizzy, slowing down just to acknowledge, hey, you know what? I don't necessarily transition super well. Now, I can bounce quickly from different things back and forth, but when I've abruptly changed the pace, so when I've gone from the do, hustle, achieve, perform, a lot of time in rest and recovery and disconnecting, it takes me a bit longer to get back on track. And there's nothing wrong with it, especially when you start to realize this is just how I show up in the world. So, again, something that I would have done before, I would have gotten really mad at myself. I would have been like maybe just a wee bit critical, but like, oh my gosh, you always do this, Robyne. Instead, Instead, simply notice, right, I need a little bit of longer runways to get myself back into momentum and just being patient with myself. And that has come from that place of awareness. I've also been open to having other people let me know, hey, don't try to dive right back in 2 feet full steam right away. Give yourself just a wee bit of time because otherwise you tend to get really overwhelmed and you don't even know where to start. So I've been open to receive that feedback from my team. Now, my gentle invitation when we think about these archetypes of self awareness is that every one of us, we're still going to have blind spots. So even if we are aware and we're taking information from secondary sources, we're still going to have blind spots. And that's why it's so important to have our trusted inner circle where they're able to help us. They're able to fill in some of those missing spots. They're able to connect some dots for us. But my other gentle invitation on this, when we start to build these relationships where we are open to feedback for people to help us stay in alignment, be able to do the good work, there is a time and place for this to be communicated. So, on our last episode with the sleep, I talked about not wanting to have really big emotional conversations right before bed. We know that just creates a lot of stress responding. So, when we think about this idea of having our trusted allies to help us with those blind spots, we want to make sure that we're setting them up for success because if we aren't in the right environment or what we call the right headspace, when someone tries to give us feedback or advice, it actually can feel really argumentative. We can get very argumentative. We can feel very threatened. I know, for example, for the longest time when people would give me feedback, my defense mechanisms were so strong that if you tried to give me feedback, I would just decide very quickly that I didn't like you anymore. Like I literally just decided you're not my people. I would just shut right down. However, instead of getting mad at myself for being somebody who wasn't committed to being a lifelong learner, as I've evolved, as I'm learning, as I'm getting more resource, I've learned that defense mechanism was a shield to protect me because I had been exposed to feedback, especially in a work environment that wasn't constructive. It was just mean. It was just like personal attacks. So, because of that experience, I started to think that I'm just not very good at feedback. However, when you take some time to unpack it, you realize, no, I just actually didn't I wasn't given the opportunity to like learn how to use feedback because in my experience, it actually been really hurtful and even harmful. So once we kind of make peace with some of parts of our story, in that case, when I now receive feedback, my initial response might be of fear to be like, oh, I don't like you. But then I can kind of slide the ego aside, make it my amigo, and say, no, no, let's hear what this person has to say. And then decide whether or not I want to accept that feedback. Just because someone gives you feedback doesn't mean you have to take it. It means they're sharing their opinion, and that's perhaps their right to do it, but you also have a right to say no thank you, or take that back, reflect on it, noodle it around, and then decide no, that's actually not really the case. For us to be able to practice, though, those skills, critical awareness, being able to practice critical thinking, being open to feedback, the reality is we have to be well resourced in terms of things like our sleep. This idea of just being well rested, grounded, present, all of this really matters. Because if we are on autopilot, first of all, we're likely missing a lot of things. But also, if we're not feeling very solid and steady, everything's going to feel really threatening. So if you notice people are irritating you all the time, if you notice that you're just not feeling very open to the world around us, I would gently encourage you to start just look after you first, right? Just take a few minutes, get your grounding, take a bit of a breather, take a wee bit of a pause, because when we are well resourced, we're much better at being able to discern the information that we want to take in. Now, the other piece around self awareness, and I want to share this with you because I've shared it on an earlier episode, and I've had some big conversations with people about this. If in our practice of self awareness, first of all, just interesting piece of research, they were interviewed a whole whack of people around self awareness, and they asked how many people are actually self aware. Like, would you report yourself as being somebody who is very self aware? And like 90% of people said yes, they are aware, they have good internal and external systems. And when they actually studied those behaviors, it was like less than 10%. Okay, so we are overcompensating, I think, in some areas, or perhaps thinking that we're perhaps more aware than we are in some circumstances, which again, why it's helpful to have trusted allies to help us with our blind spots. But what was interesting in this piece is that when people are able to identify their weaknesses, their edges, their growth points, and if you're able to, for example, tell me, okay, Robyne, these are 5 areas. If I say, what are 5 things that you need to fix or work on in your personal life, professional life, and you can like list them very quickly. And I ask you, and by the way, most people can. If I say, what are areas you have to improve, most people can tell me quite quickly what they have to work on. And if I say, what are your 5 strengths, personally and professionally? What are your 5 strengths? Sometimes people struggle. People struggle with that list of even naming 1 or 2 of their strengths. So if you only are noticing your faults or your growth areas, then I don't think you're self aware, because self awareness is seeing the big picture. It's recognizing our super skills and our gifts and our talents and our ability to navigate all of these things. And if we only look at what's wrong and don't acknowledge how far we've come or what's right, I think we're doing ourselves a pretty significant disservice. So, on that note, I encourage you to spend some time thinking about not just areas that you need to improve, thinking about things that are going right, things that are going well, things that are heading in the right direction. Now, you might not be where you want to be in every life area, but again, my gentle invitation is to get excited about the parts of you and your life and how you're showing up that are going really well. Now, as just a wee bit of a digression as well, it was quite fascinating. I had a chance to go to a concert recently. I was with the kiddos, and I was so excited to go see Post Malone. And he came to Toronto. I've been looking forward to this since for the longest time. I love old school Post Malone music, and I got there, and again, the opening act was Jelly Roll, so a country singer, Jelly Roll, and I was, I knew a couple of his songs, knew a wee bit about his story. Thought, oh, this could be good. Oh my goodness. Jelly Roll took us to church. Like he was brilliant. He was talented. He is so skilled. His showmanship, such an entertainer. And there was even moments where he was actually having a hard time singing some of his songs because he was smiling so hard through it because he was having so much fun. And when I was reflecting on how much I enjoyed listening to him perform and being part of 45,000 people singing along to some of his songs, one of the takeaways the next morning when I was unpacking it for myself was I was so excited to see somebody else in love with their life. Like it is evident that he is in love with his life. And I'm somebody who loves my life dearly. I fall in love with my kids almost each and every day in different ways. I love that this is how I get to make a livelihood. And again, there's parts obviously that are hard and they're tricky. And again, especially when you've experienced grief, you carry that with you. And knowing that you can still love your life, even with some of the bumps and bruises you've picked up along the way, and some of the trauma, some of the loss, you can still have moments where there's so many parts of your life that you're in love with. Like to me, that's so critical. I want people to get excited about parts of their life. And when I saw Jelly Roll on that stage in a moment, literally living his best life, and he talked about how significant this moment was, it just felt like it was giving me permission that it's okay for me to like really love parts of my life as well. And so often, I think what happens is because we see that there's so many people that are struggling and so many people that are hurting, we try to stay kind of quiet in the sense of we don't want people to know like our life is going really well because their life might be in a season of struggle. So we want to like kind of tone down our enthusiasm. We might want to tone down the light and the energy that we're experiencing because we don't want anyone to feel bad. We don't want anyone else to feel kind of displaced or think that you're bragging or that you aren't humble. However, I think we're silently doing this massive disservice because when you see other people doing okay, I think it does offer a message of hope that, especially if you're in a difficult season, there's comebacks. That sometimes those setbacks are actually a set up for a big, bright future that you maybe didn't even know was possible. So, the reason I want to share this and how this connects with this idea about self awareness is I notice I feel a tension. I feel a tension about not wanting to like rock the boat for anybody else or come across as not being appreciative or not being humble and having a tendency of wanting to kind of stay quiet about these things. However, seeing someone succeed, seeing someone happy and genuinely in love with his family, genuinely in love with his profession, his opportunity to serve, my gosh, it was this beautiful reminder for me that we don't need to dim our lights. And my dear friend, Dr. James Rouse, talks about this idea that we're allowed to show up under the influence of love, to show up under the influence of joy, of love, of just this opportunity to serve and to appreciate the things that are working out well. Because I think that invites more of the good. I truly believe that when we appreciate the little things, we realize they're not that little after all, and it welcomes in even bigger, brighter blessings. So, my friends, I hope learning a wee bit about the four self awareness archetypes is helpful and useful for you, recognizing that there isn't 100% of us in any of the categories. There's ebbs and flows, but it's just helpful to recognize just the value of being open for feedback, aware of who we are. And two last threads that I would love to braid into this. First, it's a quote by Dr. Wayne Dwyer, and it's one of my favorites. It says, "You can never fail at being yourself." So if you've noticed you've kind of stumbled and you notice that you're just not really getting your good traction, my gentle invitation is lean into your favorite self. Doesn't have to be your wisest self, your best self, your most professional self. When are you having fun in your own life, in your own body, in your own skin? What's happening? What are you doing? Who is around you? What kind of energy are you experiencing? Your favorite self. So again, I think a way to really lean into that quote by Dr. Wayne Dwyer, "You can't fail at being yourself," is to spend some time each day with your favorite self, where you're just having a good go. You're having like lock into the things that matter most. And the other thread there that I wanted to weave into this is when we are in a position of giving or receiving feedback, there's two other little points here. One is inspired by Dr. Brene Brown, who says, "Clear is kind and unclear is unkind." I'll say that again because it's important. Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So when we're giving feedback, I think it's important to just be direct. And the other piece about feedback, especially in relationships that really matter to us, connect before you correct. Connect on some level with the person before you offer any type of corrections. And I've learned this, my friends, the hard way. When I walk into a room, the first thing that I notice are things that are out of place. The first thing I notice often are things that didn't get done. And there's this propensity that I want to lead with that, being like, "Oh, you didn't get the dishwasher done," or "Oh, we forgot this," or "Somebody didn't put that away." Connect with the people first. "Hey, how's everybody doing? It's great to see you." Have that moment, like I share in a lot of my talks about, have your face light up to see the people that matter the most to you. Be excited about reunion and connection. And once you've connected, then you can offer that gentle correction. And the last little piece about feedback, I'm sorry, I've already said the last one like 3 or 4 times, but this for reals will be the last one, is when I remember working with a group of teenagers and I was talking to them about what information would you want me to pass along to your parent or your grown-up or your supporter. And this has to do with feedback. And the teenagers said to me something that was so significant. They said, "Not every interaction needs to be a lesson. Not every interaction needs to be a lesson." So when we're with our teenagers and we have this kind of tendency to want to give feedback and want to always correct, not every conversation needs to be a learning opportunity. It's okay that sometimes we just hang out. Sometimes we just are in each other's company and focus more on the connecting necessarily than the correcting. All right, my friends, I'm going to do my best to land this plane here. Thank you for tuning in today. I did have a whole whack of questions that came in when I was on my break from worky work, and I will make sure to address those. The next big one in the queue is, "Robyne, I can do my habits." This was the question that I'm going to bring for next day. "Robyne, I can do my healthy habits, well-being habits when everything is going well. I struggle to keep consistent when things are going poorly, when things are off course in other areas. How do we stay consistent in our healthy habits when things are going wrong?" That's what we're going to pick up next day. Please join me for that episode. I'm so excited to spend more time having these wee chats. And already by this point in the episode, I can tell you I am feeling more comfortable in my stride. I'm so glad I hit record today. And I am so glad that you hit listen. So take good care. Thank you. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you for spending time with this podcast episode today. I hope you found something helpful in Resiliency Redefined. Please feel free to share it with somebody who you might think could benefit. Maybe there was something useful, something in particular that you think you could pay forward. Also, if you have a moment, please feel free to rate and review this podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcast. It means the world to me. And again, thanks for your time. Thank you for your interest. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.